We are going to start a new psalm today, and that is Psalm 4. So we have done 1, 2, and 3, and so we're going to pick it up in 4. And we are starting our 41st psalm. My goal as the pastor of Emmanuel is to teach through the whole Bible. And we're doing a lot of that. And we've done a lot of it actually already in the last almost 9 years. But this is a great way to get through the Psalms. Now, I got to pick it up because we're going really slowly through the Psalms. But it's really amazing to think that in about a year, if you add up all the devotionals we've done and all the messages that I've already preached through Psalms, we have done 40 of them. Well, there's 150 chapters, so it won't be long before we're 1/3 of the way through this beautiful, wonderful. This is the longest book of the Bible. It's probably one of the richest books that teach us how to process our own emotions as human beings and how to relate to God and how does the human relationship work with God, who is so infinite and so powerful that yet he is interested in my experiences and my feelings and my emotions. And today we're going to pick it up in Psalm 4. I want you to turn there with me. We'll read the whole psalm together. I'll give you a few introductory thoughts, and then we'll leave it off there for today. Psalm 4, to the chief musician on Neginoth. Now that word Neginoth means, it's a reference to stringed instruments, most likely the harp, which makes sense because this is a psalm of David. David was the author of this psalm, and he was a harpist. He played the harp, which in Old Testament times was a very similar instrument to a guitar. So this was his songwriting instrument. This is what he picked up when it came time to express his heart and his worship and to process through what he was dealing with. Another, I think a really big takeaway of really many of the Psalms is that God has given us music and poetry and artistic expression often as a way, not only a way to relate to Him, but a way to understand what's going on within us. I know with me that especially my first few years in Connecticut, but still to this day, this is a process that I go through. When I'm working through something, I sit down and I can journal out or write out. Writing for me, getting it out on paper is a restorative activity. It's a fun activity, but it's also a way that I work through. I think better in writing than I do in speaking. And so writing things out for me is really, really helpful. So David was that way. When he got in a difficult moment or when he really wanted to pour his heart out to God, he did this in song, and it was his way of getting alone with God and understanding his own heart in the light of God, in the presence of God. And so that's one really wonderful takeaway, that we have these resources, that it's a way to communicate and a way to relate with God, whether we're celebrating or whether we're weeping. God's given us ways to communicate to Him. Let's pick it up in verse 1. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. O ye sons of men, how long will you turn my glory into shame? How long will you love vanity and seek after leasing? Selah. But know that the Lord hath set apart him that is godly for himself. The Lord will hear when I call unto him. Stand in awe and sin not. Commune with your own heart upon your bed, and be still. Selah. Offer the sacrifices of praise, and put your trust in the Lord. There be many that say, who will show us any good? Lord, lift thou up the light of thy countenance upon us. Thou hast put gladness in my heart, more than in the time that their corn and their wine increased. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. A couple of real early observations. You notice this is probably an evening psalm. Psalm 3 is a morning psalm, AM, PM. And these two psalms go together, Psalm 3 and 4. We've already done Psalm 3. And so let me tell you what scholars believe is the history or the story behind this psalm. This is the time of David's life when Absalom, his son, was unjustly betraying him, falsely accusing him, and garnering a following against him. So this is a time in David's life when he was experiencing horrific injustice, terrible injustice. There was a narrative, there was a story being written about David's life that that just was not true. He was in the right, but the growing consensus, Absalom had grown this following. He had developed a following of people. He had worked relationships and played politics and paid off favors. He had done a lot to garner a following and to build a narrative against David. Absalom wanted the throne, so there's a coup. And during that takeover, that hostile takeover, David and his family are exiled for a time, and there's essentially this civil war going on for the throne of Israel. And it's during this time, it was a dark time, it was a dangerous time, a desperate time in David's life. And during this time, he wrote Psalm 3 and 4. And in this particular psalm, it seems like he's about to go to sleep, right? And he's spending a moment with God before he goes to sleep. Or maybe this is a song he wrote to help himself get to sleep. But the big overarching view of this is that David was not able to defend himself. He wasn't able to correct the narrative. He wasn't able to tell the true story. Now, let me just ask you, have you ever had a time in your life when somebody was writing a story about you that was not true? It drives you crazy. If you let it into your head, it makes you crazy, especially if you have no power to correct the record. If you are in the right and your heart is pure and your actions have been ethical and honorable, honoring to God, and some other party is writing a story about you that's unjust, untrue, slanted the facts, made up facts, and is bending the situation in their favor, then you understand David's experience in Psalms 3 and 4. Now, my friend, the power of that narrative, here's the thing, is that I think we all come into moments like this and seasons like this when we've tried to be at peace, we've tried to make peace, we've tried to deal ethically with our relationships, and yet someone else doesn't want peace, isn't mature enough to have a difficult conversation, won't release, won't forgive, won't be peaceable. And instead wants to foster a negative narrative or use the situation to their advantage and politically, play against you. This is what was happening to David. And one of the great, great lessons we learn in these Psalms is that we can't let situations in which we are powerless, we can't let them dominate our lives, our psyche, our emotions, our hearts. When we're powerless to make peace or correct the narrative, we have to go to God. We can't let our inability to affect truth or the narrative, we can't let our inability to correct the record get into our head, dominate us, change our spirit, change our course, knock us off course. We can't allow the work that God has called us to and the mission he has given us to be derailed by someone uninvolved who is writing the narrative differently. Okay, now David is in this place where he's really hopeless, helpless, and defenseless unless God works in his favor. And this is what the Psalm teaches us, that God knows the record. And when we rely on him, when we put our trust in him, and when we resolve to let God be our avenger, then that's a good place to be. David was restored to the throne by God's providence and sovereignty, by God's wonderful intervention. It's a sad story. It really is a sad story. But David's case was vindicated. And so will yours be in time. Truth wins, Truth always wins. You gotta let God be your defender, okay? Don't go hard against another believer. Don't go hard to defend yourself when in a situation where truly God needs to be your defender, okay? I'm not saying if someone's criminally wronged you, if there's criminal injustice, let the system work. I mean, yes, go to authorities, use whatever mechanisms you have to protect your family. I'm not really talking about those situations. I'm talking about that relational injustice where someone has just done you wrong and you really don't have recourse. Don't let it eat your heart up. Don't let it devour you internally. You've got to let God write the record. And you've got to rest that God knows your motives, your heart, your intentions, and that you will eventually, you are justified in him, and eventually the record will be corrected by him. This is where David is in Psalm 4. Okay, so we've laid the groundwork, and we'll pick it up there tomorrow. Thanks for joining me, my friends. Happy Wednesday. Don't forget to share this podcast or this video with friends and family, people that could benefit from them, and let them know we're starting a new psalm, and tomorrow they can jump in. Till then, have a great Wednesday. See you tomorrow.